Good morning. This is Dr. Matthew Dunn, host of The Future of Email. My guest today, Josh Kropkof, CEO of the Email Agency. Welcome, man.
Thanks for having me, Matt.
Tell me about the wolf.
Oh, man.
There's a wolf over your shoulder if you're
Yeah,
listening.
no, that's cool. That's funny. Every once in a while, somebody asks that. It's just cool. I did not like having a blank wall behind me. So,
Yeah.
and I also don't like the fake backgrounds where sometimes my hand disappears or something when I'm talking to you. So I like having a nice painting behind
I've got the blur background and my earlobe keeps kind of flicking in and out of the
me.
universe. It's like being splinched in Harry Potter or something like that. Hey, give people the top line about the email agency. I've read up on you a little bit, so I'll ask annoying questions, but always good to hear it directly from the top.
For sure. And just have to say before we start, you pronounced my name perfectly and you had never asked me. So I'm actually really impressed because
Most people woof it.
rarely happens. Yeah, no, most people don't say my name right. So I was
Okay. Phew. And I should have asked you beforehand, so my bad.
No, it was great. Cool. So, yeah, the email agency, we are, as our name suggests, we do email marketing.
Yeah.
Shocker. But
Yeah.
we are mostly e-commerce focused. So we do email and SMS marketing for direct to consumer e-commerce brands, although we do work with several that are a little bit more in the B2B space or the wholesale or like a combination,
Yeah.
and a few others that aren't even considered that. But yeah, that's our main thing, and we've been doing it since 2018. We're, I'd say, pretty much still new. It's been a few years.
Yeah.
We are a small team. There's 8 of us, and we don't, we're a boutique agency. We service kind of a smaller group of clients, but we're all about getting better results than whatever you are getting now or were getting before. So
Yeah. Yeah. What led to the focus on mostly D2C companies? Did that just happen organically?
sort of. So I like we kind of come from a background of direct response marketing, which is not as traditionally a part of e-commerce D2C, but are some of our mentors who were more in the space of like digital, I guess, like digital marketing, digital products, things like that. They sort of started to steer us in the direction, I guess, of e-commerce. And this was back in like 2017, 2018. We were actually at the time trying to start a business selling our own products online and didn't have a lot of success at it because we had no idea about traffic. We just were
Oh, okay. Yeah.
new business owners right out of school.
Yeah.
But what we did learn was email at that time and how
Yeah.
effective email was, and sort of having our own email list and being able to send emails and sell stuff was just really cool. So we kind of found our way into D2C because we saw this gap where it was like, why aren't D2C brands, why aren't these people selling physical products like, clothes or furniture or electronics? Like, why are they not doing the things that we learned about? Like, why do their emails seem so different than what we're doing? And so we were like, well, can we sort of fill that gap? What if
Yeah.
we took some of that and applied it here? How would it work? And we weren't sure if it would work. And I think there's a lot of resistance to it a little bit, but it
Yeah.
turned out that it actually gets way better results. So
In the in a rearview mirror, perhaps, but what's your assessment now of why there was such a gap in the landscape as far as email and those sorts of businesses?
so I think that this still exists for sure. I think that there's a dichotomy almost to where people in the D2C space come from a more traditional, like either marketing or more traditional business background,
Ok.
which is not a bad thing. That's why I love working with these types of businesses, because they understand they have to worry about so much more than just marketing, right? That they're worrying about fulfillment, they're worried about supply chain issues,
Real stuff.
inventory products, exactly. Whereas the world I came from before this, they're not dealing with any of that. They're just selling online products online,
Yeah.
and everything is marketing
Yeah.
focused, right?
Yeah. Yeah.
So I think that there isn't enough crossover between the two worlds. I think it's changing more now. But you asked me why, and I just think that it has to do with sort of the history of where advertising came from. Like classic advertising back in the 50s and 60s was very direct response.
Mhm.
But with the invention of TV, it started going way more like branding.
Mhm.
And so I think over time, what happened is it actually became the e-commerce world came from a very corporate dominated world where
Mhm.
you had big retail brands, right? And until very recently, this is all like still pretty new,
Yeah.
where anyone can start their own retail business
Yeah.
online.
Yeah.
Problem is when they start that, a lot of times they're not sure what to do in the marketing sense, where they'll
Yeah.
be like, okay, how do I promote my products? How do I talk about my products? How do I show up? Well, they just look at what the big brands are doing
Yeah.
and they say, let me copy that. Right.
Okay. Yeah.
That's actually not a great idea. And we can get into more of that. Right. But that's, I think, where the sort of the gap is. And so I'm trying to bridge that gap as much as possible, but it's an uphill battle for sure.
There's two other factors that I think, and I'm just spitballing, but I think could potentially play a role in that pattern. Have created that opportunity gap for the email agency. One, if the founders are younger than email itself, it may not be the first channel they think of.
Hmm.
And I know quite a number of the D2C brands that jump to mind for me tend to have younger founders.
Yeah.
We're like, why don't you do it this way? Like from the very beginning, I don't need a brick and mortar store. Email may not be top of mind
Mm.
for them. And I do wonder if that plays a role. The second one, and I do think this is shifting. The second one is we're all prisoners of our tools
Yeah.
to some extent. And if you do a bunch of work to stand up an e-commerce store, none of that work necessarily results in you having the tools at your fingertips for email marketing. Shopify, Klaviyo's pair up and strong relationship, I think is changing that on the it's not just smaller businesses using Shopify, but it's changing it on that particular platform.
Right.
But someone who does heavy, e-commerce through, let's say, Amazon, an Amazon store, whatever you call that,
Right.
like they don't necessarily have an email tool set. And I know Amazon's kind of poking in that direction now, but
Right.
and it's a substantial separate job to figure out how to do that. It's a lot smarter to turn to an expert and say, how do we do this effectively?
For sure. And yeah, it's interesting about Amazon because it's like that's always sort of an issue people run into. And I think Amazon FBA sellers have, great success
Yeah.
with that channel. And a lot of times, like now, a lot of my DTC clients who didn't have that are branching into that also
Are
because
they?
it's a
Okay. Yeah.
100% revenue generator. But the issue is you don't have the email list there, right? You
Yeah.
can't, it's
Yeah. Yeah.
legally, you can't have it. So that creates a problem for you because, most of your profit is going to be made on the back end,
Yeah.
right? Through
Yeah.
repeat purchases and lifetime value and so
Yeah.
on. So it's hard to not have that list.
Yeah. And in that sense, Amazon's an extreme version of big digital ecosystem where you're renting pieces, but you don't really own the store, so to speak, and,
Yeah,
or the relationship with the customers. It's just one of the things that I really like about emails. There's no one in the middle of it.
right.
Yeah,
Yeah, no, you own it. That's what's so cool about it
yeah,
is you own that traffic.
yeah,
And I think more and more people, more and more brands are becoming aware of how important it is
yeah,
because of how much more difficult it is today to just start up a store and profit from front end advertising,
yeah,
book ads, Google, PPC, what have you.
yeah.
That stuff is so much harder today than it was just 2 years ago.
Well, and volatile costs, and we've got one of the companies I'm involved in. We've got a customer who's they've done most of their acquisition over the last couple of years through Facebook acquisition, growing their email list. And they're not happy with the way their costs have just escalated and escalated. I think the CEO said, if I knew it was going to be like this, I'd have done a lot more early on when it was, less expensive, less controlled, less, et cetera, et cetera. So I feel like, okay, focus on your email instead. I have seen, I have seen standout success from D2C brands, and they seem they seem to pop up a lot, at least in my limited experience in that Shopify Klaviyo world, because the left hand and the right hand, knowing what is happening,
Mhm.
knowing that I'm buying fill in the blanks, so I might need a fill in the blanks number two to go with it, makes for a much richer back and forth in the email channel. And if you don't have those pieces wired together, which is it's no guarantee you do,
Right.
it's harder to
Right.
keep track, to stay relevant, to understand what it is this customer needs from you, and speak accordingly.
Yeah, for sure. I think a lot of brands sort of struggle with this because there is an environment that we live in now where, people talk about inbox clutter. People talk about, I get too many emails.
Yeah.
And there's sort of I think, almost a stigma against relying too heavily on the email channel.
Hmm.
And so I think that there's sort of these all come down to just, over time, people sort of becoming more aware of things. And I think we're trending in a positive direction, but there's sort of a misunderstanding, I think, of how you look at the email channel. Because I always say it's not a marketing channel. Don't think of it like a marketing channel. It's a relationship channel.
Well put. Yeah. Here, here.
And I think that's a big difference is like people don't and then that makes sense, right? Like, okay, yeah, it is. I can it's a relationship channel. All right. But what does that look like? Okay. How do I have a
How do I do
relationship
that? Yeah.
with someone through
Yeah.
email?
Yeah.
And I think it comes down to conversation, actually. I think it comes down to seeing it as a place for conversation because that's what email is, right? Like that's where it comes from. It was never supposed to be a place for advertisement.
Right.
Just that's not what it initially was for. It got used that way very, very quickly.
Yes. Yes.
But I think it was
Digital Equipment Corporation, first email campaign ever.
right, right. Yeah,
Yeah.
70s, right?
Yeah. 70.
And it was like the most successful spam email in the world.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah. And I don't know if we want to hug the guy or curse him. It would have
Mhm.
happened sooner or later, right? And the fact that it's the channel that doesn't have a gatekeeper and doesn't really have a toll running, right? The cost of sending email isn't when you hit the send button.
Yeah.
It's all of the pieces involved in what goes out being useful and valuable and, right for that customer and so on.
Right.
Yeah. 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 So, yeah, relationship channel. I like that. There's a brand that's kind of been going to the back of my head as a good example of D2C. Curse me for saying this, but I've started playing golf thanks to a friend of mine. And as I started equipping myself with clubs from this century, I ended up buying from a smallish D2C golf club brand. And I've been blown away at their email game. Like they're really good. If I
Okay.
look at something, they know I've looked at it, but they don't automatically pounce. They
Mhm.
do stay on the follow-up, and then the steady stream of, "Hey, what club would you use in, watch this video, what club would you use here?" Stuff that's keeps them right, right at the tip of my mind, even though I think the bag is about as full as it needs to be for my limited skills. It's like they're doing a good job with that channel, and I think I read somewhere that when they brought someone in to help them with email, that's when their sales started spiking. They started realizing, "Oh, this is how you do it," because you're not gonna buy one golf club.
Mhm.
You're just not.
Yeah.
Yeah.
What for you, I'm just curious, like what made you kind of like want to keep reading their emails? Or was it, I mean, putting aside the fact that you're an email guy, because I know
Yeah.
we're in the game,
Yeah,
so it's
we're
a little
weirdos,
hard
right?
to be objective, right? But if
Um,
you had to pull yourself out of it, like what?
they've and I'll give them we'll give them the compliment here. 15 minutes of fame, guys. It's Bomb Tech Golf up in Vermont. They keep a really deft cadence between stuff that's just purely interesting and no sale,
Mm.
and oh yeah, we've got a special going on, 72-degree wedge or something like that. And I do find myself keeping an eye on the sales side of it. Why? Because you're never going to buy just one golf club. But then the other stuff, when I open it, it's almost always like, oh, well, that was interesting. And it had its own style and personal feel, not like somebody sat down and pulled a template off a shelf and tried to fill in my name and put golf club in there when instead of garden tool. Yeah, like
Right.
it's very genuinely inside that world material that's coming my way, and they don't personalize super explicitly. Like first name's dead. I think I think you and I were talking about that in advance, but I know that what I get is probably what you get because I've bought other things from them and they've kept track of it, as I said, with that marry-up between, I'm sure there's Shopify plus Klaviyo. I'm just sure of it.
hmm
Yeah.
Well, yeah, it's interesting because I think that the biggest problem that most companies run into with email is that they're too predictable. It's always the same stuff, right? I know I don't have to open the email because I already know what's
What it's
going to
going to be.
not only are you telling me in the subject line that it's another sale,
Yeah.
but
Yeah.
that's all you ever send me,
Yeah. That's all you ever
right?
send me. Yeah. Yeah.
So I think it's how do we get away from that and still be profitable? And I think that it does come back to this relationship thing because what a lot of these brands maybe don't realize, maybe don't have the resources necessarily, or maybe whoever's doing the email isn't really treating it this way, whether,
Yeah.
not necessarily their fault. Okay. But you can increase the value of that asset, meaning the email list as
Yeah.
an asset of your company through keeping more people engaged over time.
Yeah.
Even if those, like, you're not sending a sale email. Okay. You're sending an interesting engagement email
Yeah.
that's during a conversation that's already happening in their brain.
Yeah.
But what's interesting is that they're reading, right? If you get enough people, more than the typical company gets, a greater percentage to actually keep with your emails. Now, doing it this way, also, you have great deliverability, which is a different
It's
conversation,
true.
right?
Yeah. Yeah.
But like, what if your emails are in my primary inbox, not
Yeah.
my promotions tab?
Yeah.
What if I'm reading them consistently? And then when you do have a sale at the end of the year, I'm there. I'm showing up because you've kept me this whole time.
Yeah.
You're not
Yeah.
just sending me sales and things, but it's
Yeah.
interesting also that, like, we talk about personalization and everyone talks about that now, right? It's becoming like a thing, like personalization.
Oh, do
Um,
tell me your perspective. This will be fun.
yeah. Well, I think look, I'm a little different than a lot of the people you'll hear talk about this. So I think, you know, what is it not, right? Okay, what's personalization not? It's not first name merge tag, right? Dear
Yes.
Josh, that's not
Yeah. Yeah.
personalization.
No.
Geo targeting is different to me. That's not like, okay, you know where I live. That's awesome. That's not personalization. Showing me the products that you think I want to see. Maybe, okay, to
Maybe.
me, personalization is synonymous with persona and personality. I want to connect with you. That's what personalization is. If think about it like this, why are you more inclined to keep doing business with your local pizza parlor,
Yeah. Yeah.
mom and pop pizza parlor that you've kept going to for 17 years? Well, there's a personality, there's a connection there, and they're giving you personalized service. But what does that mean? It means that you actually have a connection with that person. And I think that this is a huge missed opportunity in email marketing. It's something that maybe is scary to some people. And I've you know, come up against a lot of resistance to this. I have a great story I can tell you in a few minutes, but like, why not have a person send your emails? Why not have a face, a person behind your emails, right?
Hallelujah. I'm so glad you said that. Yes.
Okay. Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah.
What have you experienced this? Like, is this something that you thought about? Like,
I had a guest on this podcast about a year ago, and mea culpa, I am blanking on the name,
okay.
but his approach to the email, not in the same niche you're in, but was very philosophically what you just said. He's like, he said, my email list, and this, I think a one man strategic consulting agency. He said, my email list is, such and such big, but like 60% read rate or something like that. And he said, it's because I write every word and it's very much my style, my voice, my subject matter, and my name on it. It's not fake.
Mhm.
It's an actual person. And I end up citing him about every other conversation about email. Ben Thompson writes a newsletter called Stratechery that I'm a loyal subscriber of. The
Yeah.
guy's freaking brilliant. He writes prolifically and well. And like, there's no question I get Ben Thompson's, voice in those emails. And I
Yeah.
pretty much first thing I open every morning. Yeah.
Exactly. And this is what brands, I think, more are coming around to this now, but it's so important
Yeah.
because this is partly becoming more important because of what's going on with social media. And because that channel is less effective, you have to treat your email list a little bit more like a social channel.
Mm.
And that means showing up with a personality. And a lot of people, I mean, I've seen both sides of it. Like there are brands who I've worked with who like totally would not, just against
Not their
this. Like
style.
this needs to be a sort of just behind the logo. Like this is the brand.
Yeah.
I don't know who's talking to me. I'm reading the email. Is this coming from, a boardroom? Is this coming from, does the
Yeah.
logo have a voice, right? What is a brand voice? Well, I would argue try making a person as the face of
Yeah.
your brand.
Yeah.
And
Nice. I like that.
we have time for a quick story on this.
Absolutely.
Okay, cool. So a few years ago, when we were really kind of starting to do this for larger companies for the first time, we had like a few smaller clients, and then we started to get some larger ones.
Mhm.
And we got this client they are one of the more recognized home decor. They're in the home decor space, and in this particular niche, which has to do with framing pictures, essentially,
Mhm.
they're at the top. So they weren't like having much success on the email side. Email was making up less than 3% of this company's total revenue. And this, at the time, they were a high level 8-figure company. They're now a multi 9-figure company. But when we came in, we had some initial resistance and pushback to this idea.
Yeah.
And so we basically said, let us do a test.
Yeah.
Let us give you something to test against your current. They had like a certain email sequence that would go to a new person who signs up, a welcome flow.
Right.
And we said, let us test one. They said, all right, fine. We did this very, very extreme. So they had very typical common branding emails for their company, looked like anything else in your inbox. What we did was we wrote plain text emails
Mhm.
coming from a character we made up.
Mhm.
Her name was Colleen, and she was the super fan of the brand. She was basically obsessed with this brand and had all their stuff all over her house. And the emails were all telling stories from her standpoint
Mhm.
of different ways she uses the product. They were so scared to try this. At first, I was like, I don't even know if they're going to do it, if they're going to test
Yeah.
it.
Yeah.
They did. But at first, they were like, we're going to give you 10% of traffic. So, like,
Yeah.
all right. Eventually, it started working. They were like, all right, we'll do the 50-50. They ran it for 100 days. It did 85% more revenue. Not
That's
only that,
awesome.
yeah, not only that, but like click through rate through
Yeah.
the roof,
Yeah. Yeah.
open rate
Yeah.
way higher because it's
Yeah.
getting inboxed.
Yeah.
Average order value
Yeah.
so much higher.
So much higher. Yeah.
So that's
Nice.
me, like that's the ultimate test. That was the thing that really like proved to us because this was early 2020
Yeah.
and we were still pretty, we'd only been doing this for a year and a half and we
Yeah.
were still it was just me and my two business partners at the time, no team. And we were like, this changes, like this proves what we've been trying to do,
Yeah.
right? This was
Yeah.
like our big proof of concept.
That's awesome.
Um,
That's
so
awesome.
yeah, the sad part is they didn't want to continue going. They went with it for a little while. They went with us for like 6 months. But ultimately, like this is the thing with some of these companies is that there is an ego factor that can get in the way a little bit. And I
Mm.
think people
Mhm.
still it's funny, I think I heard one of your guests recently. I listened to a few of your episodes, and they said the end of the day was the client care about revenue. And like that's the number one thing. And man, I wish that were true. I wish that was the number one thing. They might say it is, but you know what? If every company said, if they truly cared about revenue as the number one thing, they'd all be sending plain text emails. They'd all be doing direct response, just very personal, like, person in front of the brand. And I think that would be like the majority of what you would see. And I know there's a knowledge gap. We've been talking about it, but I've seen this time and time again where even when it proves to work so much better, at the end of the day, it's really, really hard to break from sort of just this view that people have about emailing, what it should look like and what it
Right.
should feel like. They have
I'm not in
concept.
I'm not entirely surprised that you see that challenge in the landscape and that you even have a proven successful, you know, approach dropped, right? Because companies will say that revenue's the focus, but at a certain scale, a lot of it tends to be acquisition of internal power is the real focus on an employee by employee basis. And there there is a there is an unwritten sort of template. Yeah, I think you kind of touched on it already. And as I go through my inbox, I expect stuff to kind of look, act, smell, be like like it's supposed to, even though that
Right.
doesn't necessarily work. And as I've run creative agencies myself. I got to where I just couldn't stand the brand police at big companies
Mm,
because they were so intent on yanking the big cookie cutter out and going ka-chunk that they
mm.
pretty much killed any actual creative undertaking. It's like, no, it's not on brand. Well, if your brand's putting everyone to sleep, maybe you should be looking at that. But they wield a lot of power.
For sure, and I don't want people to get the wrong idea, like, branding is important, it's
Sure,
super
sure,
important, and
sure.
brand guidelines are important, and we don't I don't subscribe to, like, I don't want people to think that, like, that's what we do, because
Just chuck
we
that out.
very
Yeah,
rarely do these days a plain text email, although we
hmm,
do them when, like, as long as a client is okay with it,
yeah,
that is something that we sprinkle that in because it is very, very effective,
yeah.
but
Makes
it
sense.
goes to this principle of not being so predictable.
Yeah,
You wanna vary because this is what keeps people engaged. Like a good email program, people get hung up on the frequency thing, and I hear this all the time. It's like, "Don't send I don't care what you're selling. I don't wanna see your emails 5 times a week." Well, here's the thing about that. Like, in reality, no one expects that you're gonna read every single email, but think about do you follow any YouTubers?
a few. Yeah, a few.
Okay. Like, most YouTubers that are good, that have, like, a big following, they there's videos every day, right?
Yeah.
Sometimes more than once a day, but
Yep.
pretty much every day.
All the
Do
time. Yeah.
you necessarily watch every video? No.
Sure.
Y
Right.
but the you're keeping up with it on some level. Like, if this is a YouTuber you're subscribed to, you're
Yeah.
interested in, like them, you're
Yeah.
gonna go back. I do this all the time. It's like when I have some free time, I'm gonna binge watch the videos for the last month
Yeah.
because
Yeah.
they're all great. But the key is what's happening there is I'm connecting with this person. They're giving me value. There's a reason I'm watching this person's videos, right?
Yeah.
So you can do that same thing with email. And that's, I think, what people don't quite realize. And you can do it as a brand. I strongly, my view is you should have a person. I think it's very, much more effective if you
Yeah.
can
Yeah.
have a character
Yeah.
and they at least show up sometimes, right?
Yeah.
Whether it's a
Yeah.
real person, the founder of the company,
Yep.
or whether it's a made up character like I
Yep.
just described. But you can still get the same effect, speaking as the brand, but you have to be giving people value. And what that comes down to is a connection and, being not so predictable, but giving me something that I actually want to read about. And this is the thing that, like, what we run into is, like you mentioned, how there's sort of like a structure with companies internally. There's a struggle where it's like sort of that cookie cutter way of doing things. Well, I think what a lot of companies are getting, they're sort of missing the mark on email, but this goes to everything else, is that they get hung up on sort of the wrong things. Like, okay, my email I want my email program to be good, and in order to do that, I have to have my email department, and I need coders, I need this sort of like QA system, et cetera, et cetera. Look, I don't have a single coder in my company. We've never needed one, and I have nothing against coders. We work with them from time to time. I'm just saying, here's what's essential. We talk to companies who we have to spend time in the beginning with them working on things like their USP, like what makes you unique, what makes your golf clubs different
Right.
than
Right. Yeah.
every other golf club out there.
Yeah.
And a lot of brands will say, "Oh no, we have this down." But Do you really though?
Do you really?
Have you really thought about it? And the
Yeah.
thing is, it should evolve. Like, it's not one of those set it and forget it things.
Yeah, that's good.
Like these different things, unique mechanism, USP, these are, high level direct response things, but
Yeah.
like
Yeah.
even just understanding the awareness level of the people at different stages of the customer journey. Are they product aware? Are they problem aware, solution aware? These are like different psychological levels that people are on when they are
Mhm.
at different stages with you.
Mhm.
And then a big one, like, what are their objections and how am I overcoming them? How am I answering that in
Mhm.
copy and my branding? So these are the things that I find most people, we work with mostly 7-figure companies and like 8-figure, some 8-figure, but most are in the 7-figure. And a lot of times the founder they love the initial part of like our onboarding and our like getting to know them in the first week or two because we sit down with them and we discuss these things.
Mhm.
And then we go and we do our research and then we come back to them because we're online looking at forums, like places where people are discussing things just really openly and like Reddit forums and things like that.
Yeah.
And so you come back and founders are like, holy crap, like I didn't even think about it that way. I didn't know people were saying this about my product or, that people in my space that I'm trying to get to use my product are thinking this way. They end up changing different other aspects of their marketing that have nothing to do with email because now we have them thinking in this way of like psychologically what's going on in the consumer's mind. So
Mm.
I know I'm kind of rambling here.
No, no, no. It's really an invaluable approach. And you're talking about such strong fundamentals,
Right.
right? They're not channel. They're not about the channel.
Right.
They're like
Yeah.
about the fundamentals of what's this business do for whom, and really pinning that down
Right.
so that it's said in the email marketing space that one of the problems with email is it works even when you do it badly. And I think there's some truth to that. Right? Companies can have a relatively limp approach to the channel and still end up making the cash register, ring more than it costs them to run the channel, which is a far cry from what would happen if you did it really well, like you're
Right.
obviously helping your clients do.
Yeah, you'll see it in certain metrics. You're right. Like overall, because you can have people that kind of phone it in a sense of
Yeah.
where like
Yeah.
they've been sending the same emails
Yeah.
in the same
Yeah.
way for
Yeah.
years
Yes.
and they make money. We call that sort of a churn and burn though.
Yeah.
Like
Yeah.
where
Because
it's
yeah.
like get the lead to sign up,
Yep.
get them the discount. And then if they I've heard people use the term buy or die. I hate that term. It's like, come on,
Ugh,
like that's how you
that's
think of it.
awful.
Right? And but they'll literally say like, this is like they have to buy by this certain point or they're going to stop getting emails from
Yeah.
me and I'm moving on.
Yeah. Yeah.
And so you can do it that way. You're going to miss the entire value of and I think people they don't a lot of times realize how much of an asset the email list like this gets evaluated when companies do
Yeah.
about when you're
Yeah.
selling a company and their
Yeah.
evaluation. You want to put a dollar value on every lead on the list. So I just mentioned there's metrics where this comes out. Well, the people who are doing what you just talked about, a lot of times that stat dollar per active subscriber, or, in Klaviyo terms, it's like they look at RPR revenue per recipient, which isn't as good. It's interesting, not quite as good though. I
Yeah.
like dollar per subscriber, dollar per active subscriber,
Yeah.
because this is a true measure of the value of that list. And over time, is that going up or is it going down?
We're going down. Nice.
Going up.
Yeah. Nice.
And the thing is that a company that's not treating the channel like a relationship channel, it will not go up over time.
Right.
It'll either be flatline or it'll go, in most cases, it goes down over
Right.
time.
Right.
Even though your list is bigger, you're making way less per person on the list.
Yeah.
That's not good.
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
Pay
It's not getting
attention.
your word of mouth and and all the other struggles that go with. And I would bet you've seen churn higher on those than if what was the metric you just mentioned? The dollar per
For
active,
active subscribers.
dollar per active. I'm betting if dollar per active is trending up, that your churn rate is going to be lower than the guy whose dollar per active subscriber is trending flat or down.
Right.
It's
Yeah.
got to be, right? Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. I'm I'm fascinated. I'm still I'm hooked 15 minutes ago when you were talking about creating a persona
Okay, cool.
for the from on a company. My background before I started doing this many years ago now was a professional theater director.
Very
So yeah, so I've got a long-standing fascination with narrative and narrative structures and character design and stuff like that. And I can totally see the value of the approach. I'm going to bet there are companies who've had that happen kind of accidentally with an actual employee, and they're hooped if he or she actually picks up and leaves. They're like, wait a minute, who's gonna replace you is the relationship fulcrum with all of those customers out there versus a persona which they can actually own.
right, right. Yeah, I see what you're saying because you could have this person, and this happens all the time, right? Where there's a person who's
Yeah.
got this connection with the customer,
Yeah.
and
Yeah.
that person leaves. That's why it is still about the brand voice, right? For a
Mhm.
lot of these companies, it's cool that you mentioned your background being in theater. I've done a little theater, but I used to be a magician. That was my
No kidding.
um,
Awesome.
career for many years in high school, college, and a little bit after that. And so I'm familiar with the whole like the performance kind of
Yeah.
thing. And I
Yeah.
think that that is a perfect like, and maybe that's why I approach things this way. But, a lot of people ask me, well, what is direct response, right? Like, what does that really mean when you talk about direct response marketing? And I might have mentioned this earlier, but like it's just about that connection. It's about having a connection. It's not, people think of it as like being very salesy or like pushing a sale on people. Like that's not what it's about.
Yeah.
It's about having this connection. So a good way to think of it is I use a radio analogy. That's like my favorite analogy for an email list is a
Huh.
good radio host
Yes.
will have this connection with an audience.
Yes.
You're on the radio every day.
Yes.
Doesn't mean you're tuning in every day for every hour. They're on there 2, 3. I mean, I've heard shows
Yeah.
where the same guy's on 5, 6 hours. You're
Yeah.
not listening to the whole thing.
Yeah.
However,
Yeah.
if they're a good radio host, they have an audience that has this connection with them. They love hearing their voice. They tune in and they're like, he's talking to me or she's talking to me.
Yep.
These are two very opposite people. And I have no opinion on either of them, but like the two greatest radio hosts of all time were Howard Stern, or still there, and Rush Limbaugh.
Yeah.
Just
By the
passed.
numbers. Yeah.
Yeah, two totally
Absolutely.
opposite people talking about totally different things. They're probably two very different opinions from each other, but like both of them, tens of millions of listeners, and they really have the ability to have this connection with people that is insane when you think about it, how it crosses just every like barrier physically because
Yeah.
it's like these radio waves, right? Not to get into all that stuff, but like my point is with the email list, this actually gives anyone the ability to do the same thing. Talk about the future of email. I actually think in the future, way more people will have email lists. I think it's trending that way. I think more people
Yeah,
will.
I think you're probably right. I'm gonna hook an unexpected thing. I'm gonna hook three
Sure.
unexpected things together at once if I
Go.
can here. One, everything you just outlined about the persona approach, which I think is wonderful and agree with fundamentally, is one of the reasons why I don't lie awake at night worrying at all about AI, at least the chat form of AI invading the email space. I got a text from a friend this morning because I want to talk to you about text a little bit as well.
Sure.
I got a text from a friend this morning. She happens to be a counselor, like, helps clients work through their particular moments in life. And she sent me she recorded herself saying something that she frequently says to clients, and then she fed it through an AI, and I forget which one, to get it sort of cleaned up because conversational recordings don't look like you want a written document to look.
Okay.
But what we agreed on in text, and this is going back and forth in text, was how freaking bland
Hmm.
the AI output was. It was like Yeah, it sort of got everything you said. And I said, Margaret, oh, I gave her name away. Margaret, Mary, whatever her name was. Sorry. I said, do you remember how blurry the early digital camera pictures were?
Mhm.
She said, yeah. And I said, this is the linguistic equivalent. Like, it got what you said, but it's really frickin' blurry. And I really don't want to look at it because it's kind of averaged it out and it sounds like corporate speak and it's lost all of the charm and authenticity that was there in what you said and fed into the beast. And I think we will start seeing, we are, I'm sure, seeing AI driven copy because people love to cut a corner. I think it's gonna flop because it mostly sucks. You can't always put your finger on why it sucks, but it doesn't have any personality.
Yeah, it is an interesting topic for sure. It's a huge thing
Oh,
in our space right now,
oh
and
yeah.
actually in the direct response space, like the more traditional direct response internet marketing world, like
Yeah.
it's the topic.
Yeah,
But
sure.
what I think is that it will evolve. Like what you're
Sure.
saying is absolutely
Sure.
true. Like it's not the
For
greatest,
now.
you know. It evolves fast though, right? So here's what it'll mean because I think you're right. People, brands, companies, they may try to, as they are, cut corners. Some people where it's like, I'm just going to feed stuff into this machine and spit it out and use that to produce content, emails, posts, whatever.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
But there is a problem with that where, like, yes, it can definitely seem like it was written, and sometimes you can absolutely tell instantly, like, okay, Chat
Yeah.
GPT did this,
Yeah.
right?
Yeah. Yeah.
What's cool is though, if you have a good prompt, and this is something I am not an expert in, but I'm learning it. There are a few guys out there that are really doing some work on this. I won't name drop anyone here right now, but there's a book I read recently. Rob Allen, that's who wrote the book. It's something like how to be an AI prompt engineer. Basically, it's you, there are ways to
Yeah.
feed Chat GPT the perfect prompts
Sure.
so that you get really good stuff
Yeah.
out of it. I think it's what you need is if someone understands direct response copywriting,
Yeah.
that person can actually create really good prompts
That makes
and
sense.
engineer a perfect response. I'll tell you what I use it for. This is a bit of an inside baseball thing that I don't tell anyone, but I've played around with this. So we do some cold email,
Mhm.
not a ton. That's interesting though. We actually have some clients who are having us do it for certain things, basically like wholesale accounts, and
Yeah.
we're experimenting with that. But we've always done it for our agency. It's the way we started getting clients in
Yeah.
late 2018, early 2019. And it's something we've always, even though we get clients other ways now, we still do the cold email. Just this tradition and it works when it works and sometimes doesn't work, but it's good to have it out there. Anyway, what I've done is I've taken cold emails and I put them in the Chat GPT and said, write this in the voice of blank, and I'll pick a TV character.
Yeah.
And oh, it's hilarious.
Yeah.
It's really funny to see it spit something out. I don't know if you're familiar with the show Mad Men,
Sure.
but I've had it
Don
write,
Draper.
yeah, write this how Don Draper would say it. It's on point. It's so perfect how Don Draper would say it. So it's funny. You can't necessarily just take what it says and
Yeah.
use it. You got to
Yeah.
edit, make it your own. But
Yeah. Yeah.
that kind of stuff, I think, is fun. But I
The
hope it. Go ahead.
No, I was just gonna say I think we just outlined, hopefully some of the big email service providers end up listening to this episode because I think we just outlined what they'll end up doing eventually, which is do not give me the bland AI to help me with email copy. Let me buy a persona from you.
Mm, that's hard. That's
I
a
know it's hard.
what I want it to do is I really want the AI to take care of the more technical stuff. That's what I feel like it should be taking care of.
Yeah.
I want it to figure out how to make, the email, if I'm using an email that has a lot of graphics, it's got, a good visual to it. It should display correctly on every device without us having to worry about,
Yeah. Yeah.
right?
Yeah.
Worry now about like dark mode and things
Yeah.
like that.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
AI should be taking care of all of that. We should not have human beings having to worry about how to manipulate the software to do certain things. The software should do those things itself. That's what AI should be used.
Yep.
We'll see, right? We'll see.
We'll see. Yeah, we'll see. Heads exploding somewhere as people who, spend decades mastering the intricacies of email HTML, which is just a gnarly space.
Right.
Like, do I think eventually that there'll be synthetic mastery of that handcraft? Yeah, I
Mhm.
do. I hope. For the same reason you do. It's like we should not have people who are sitting there closing carrots and slashes for a
Yeah.
living. Like, God dang, right?
Yeah, that's that's hard work. I
It's
mean,
grim, man.
and I'd like to see what AI can do in the design field.
We'll see. Yeah.
We our philosophy, which is, again, pretty different than a lot of the agencies out there, is that the design follows the copy. So, for us, it is we're creating a message, we're creating the words that are going to sell your product and create a relationship and get, great engagement
Mhm.
and have that connection. Our designers, what they do is the copy is almost like a creative brief for them. They have
Right.
to That's why, like, our designers are not traditional, like, HTML designers or, like, coders. We have more, like, artists and, like, illustrators and people who have
Nice.
sort of creative brain, because we will give messaging to them, and it's their job to figure out, how can I, like, this is a USP, or we'll call it like a UVP driver email, where there's, basically a big promise in the lead. There's a hero image, there's a big promise, there's, I know I'm getting a little in the weeds here, but, there's, like, blocks where we're describing a certain benefit, and
Yeah.
it's their job to figure out visually now, what should that look like? What's the image that goes with that? What kind of design goes with what we're saying here in the email? And I think so many people, that's one place I'll take a hard stance against most other agencies and email marketers, is I think people have it backwards. I think they usually put the copy into a design almost like an afterthought, and for us, it's always worked the other way around, and I just think that's why it's more effective to use direct response in this way.
You I think you're giving maybe more credit than is actually merited for the boilerplate stuff in my inbox, because it looks to me frequently like both the copy and the visuals were sort of dragged off a shelf and plopped
Oh,
in place. It's like, God, enough with the clip art, enough with the stock photography. How, right? Like it just
sure.
doesn't register anymore. And having an actual, having someone take the creativity that a visual artist can have and put it to that message, not a generic, but that message. That's powerful. That's
Yeah.
really
No, I
powerful.
know, and it's not super easy, right? And it's
No.
it's a task for sure to get the and we wanna scale this whole thing, and that's a little hard, but I think it's worth it though,
Yeah.
because I don't wanna live in a world where email pretty much, it's not gonna die, right? It is and I know you've had those discussions over and over, like, it's not going anywhere,
No.
but I think it can be sort of placed in a certain box by society that we're kind of almost trying to treat it as now, which is like, it's an annoyance. It's like something I get too many emails. I can't tell, like, every day on LinkedIn I see people posting about how proud they are that they just unsubscribed from, how many different,
Yes.
like, we have to sort of, as email marketers, we have sort of a responsibility, I think, to change that, and we don't change it by, you know, yelling at people, or arguing that email's great. Like, no, you change it by doing
Doing it.
it in a way where you're gonna develop a true connection with the person and help people. I mean,
Yeah. Yeah.
if a brand has a real mission, a story that they wanna tell, which most brands today do, like, this is one of the cool things about e-commerce in today's world, is anyone can do it. It's, like, there are people who are just figuring out they don't have to do some job they don't like, and, they don't have to be stuck in a certain situation. They can actually start a brand, and they have a story to tell, and they have a mission and a reason why they believe in their products. So, you know, it's the job of the marketer. And I think email is unique in the sense that we have this opportunity of being in a private place like someone's inbox to
Mm.
get this
Yeah, yeah,
across.
yeah, yeah.
But it's a responsibility to do it the most justice you
To do
can.
it well. Yeah, no, that's really good. That's really well put. I'm curious you're thinking because you mentioned email and SMS at the very beginning of this,
Mm,
and I'll throw this out for reaction.
sure.
What I see in text marketing is like stone knives and bear skins. It's like at the early stages and the few commercial texts that I've continued to subscribe to instead of saying stop, mostly professional curiosity,
Hmm.
are just sale, sale, sale. That's all they
Yeah.
do. And all they're doing is training me to wait until they put whatever I might want on sale. Like, do they have good mind share? Yes. I looked at a text while we were talking. Ding. I'm like, oh yeah, that one. Right. But
Hmm.
that's all they're doing is sale, sale, sale. It's personality free, kind of value free. It's sooner or later I'll go, pow, stop.
Yeah. I'm the same way.
Yeah.
Same thing where I'll sign up usually out of professional curiosity.
Yeah.
And I wish I had some good examples for you. I know that there are some pioneers with SMS doing it in a more personalized way,
I'll bet.
personality.
Yeah.
I think there's a limitation of that platform right now. And I agree with you. I think we're in the early stages of it
Yeah.
because it is very hard to do what we can do on email
Yeah.
because we're so limited by the number of characters and so on and so forth, right? So I think that the way that you treat SMS as a brand has to be essentially it's a one level of exclusivity up from the email list. It should be it should be secondary to the email list, but complementary. So
Mhm.
people who get on the SMS list are giving you the most private channel they have. They're giving
Yeah.
you access to
Yeah.
them in the most private way they can. So you have to respect that
Yeah.
and you have to sort of they should get better things than other people do. It
Yeah.
is right now primarily a channel for sales, and again, it's the limitations of the platform. It's the cost and stuff. Like we're seeing more and we do some engagement and some like SMS that are a little bit more personality, a little bit more content.
Yeah.
It's just hard because you're so limited in the amounts that you can do.
Well, and your attention allocation at the other end
Mm,
will get exhausted quite quickly. Why? It's a high priority interrupt. And even if I think your writing is witty and your, corporate persona is great and all that other stuff, I really don't want to get a ping from you
right.
too often. Why? Because I will look at it. And
Right.
there's no way you're going to write something that I actually want to look at, you know,
Yeah.
twice a day or something like that, because man, that was, nanoseconds of my time that just went looking at the screen when that thing
Yeah.
popped up. Yeah.
Got it.
Brands that have figured out the sort of content personality stuff in the email channel and then the useful functional stuff on the text channel, your clubs are on the way, so to speak.
Right. Right.
Like,
Right.
okay, definitely done. Why? Because I do care about when those arrive.
Yeah.
Right.
And I think definitely for those kinds of things like the post purchase
Yeah.
journey should
Yeah.
definitely be.
Yeah.
The other thing that I found that we'll use it for very effectively is giving people early access to something.
Yeah. That's good.
Whether it's the new product that you're launching or whether it is your Black Friday sale that
Yeah.
everyone's doing. Most effective thing you can do is let them know like a week in advance, send a text, and we don't send texts every day. It's not the same as email,
Yeah.
but we'll give people a heads up like, hey, since you're on this list, you're going to get something earlier than everyone else. So look out for this text.
Nice. Yeah.
And then you send them the text and they are getting it earlier than everyone else. We found that to be really, really
Yeah.
effective.
It makes sense.
Um,
It makes sense. And you would reserve that. You don't fake that one because you'll get caught.
yeah. Oh,
Yeah.
yeah. No, of course.
Yeah.
No, no fake scarcity, no fake
No fake
urgency,
scarcity. Yeah.
definitely no fake exclusivity. That all has to be real.
That all
Um,
has to be real. Well, Josh, this has been a gas, and I'm trying to respect the time of a guy running an agency. I think we could probably go on for another hour. Any parting recommendations if someone's listening and saying, I really need to up my email game? What do you say to them?
For sure. Can I tell you about my newsletter real quick? Is that
Absolutely.
okay? Cool. We have a newsletter called the Email Revolution, and we are basically like our promise with the newsletter is we'll give you an edge in pretty competitive marketplace by showing you how to use direct response email marketing with your brand or with your company. So it's called the Email Revolution newsletter, and I got a URL to make it like super easy to remember. It's email123.club. Super easy. I I like radio, so we want you to remember if you're just listening, email123.club.
He's parked free courtesy of GoDaddy.
I did this today for your show, so it'll
Oh,
be
okay. Cool. Because I was going to say, I want to put the link in the episode notes.
Okay. It
Cool.
will be there. It'll
Let's
be
make
there.
sure. Yeah, we'll make sure. Yeah, we'll correspond and make sure it's live. There's a great book you might pick it up on ABE Books. I'm sure you can find it on Amazon. Empires of the Air: History of Radio. Freaking great read.
Very cool.
Great read. Yeah.
I did 2.5 years of radio in college, just
Did
on
you?
the college station. Yeah, but I love it. I absolutely love it. One day I would love to be like on a commercial.
Yeah. Yeah, you got the voice for it too, man. Yeah, Empires of the Air. I've read it probably 3 times. It's just fascinating. Watching a media that brought other people's personalities into living rooms. That was revolutionary. Like that had never happened before. And, think Fireside Chats and FDR,
right?
To get a, glimmer of the impact. Anyway, well, cool. Josh Kropkof, The Email Agency. It's at theemailagency.com.
Yes.
That's where people hunt you down. Well, Josh, it's been a fantastic conversation. I'm so glad you agreed to come on board.
Thank you, Matthew. And yeah, this has been really fun. I think it's really cool what you're doing because the future of email is like the perfect name for these conversations. So I might have some people I could connect you with to have on the show that would be really cool.
Oh, that'd be awesome. Yeah, that'd be awesome. Send them my way.